I consume an inordinate amount of Age of Sigmar lore. I've owned every single battle tome. I did reviews on most of them in terms of breaking down the lore, and I'm hammering away through the Black Library novels that they put out for Age of Sigmar, personally and in our Age of Sigmar book club, which I'll leave a link to down below. Point is, I love this stuff. I love the setting. I love the idea of this heroic fantasy where there's monsters that have physics that defy scale and gravity, gods and demigods all playing with mortals and their fates and stuff like that. I think it's the backdrop for some really awesome stories, and they equip me to tell my own on the tabletop. Now, that being said, we are 3 books, I believe, into the Age of Sigmar book club, and there's a few reoccurring things that I noticed that make books fall flat. And of course, that's 3 books in with the Age of Sigmar Club. I have read personally many more than that, but the point is there's a lot of things coming up over and over and over again. And so in this video, I wanted to talk about a few ideas I had that would go a long way to kind of improving the depth of the lore and kind of creating attachment to the world that they are writing. The reason I care is because, like I said before, the setting is so primed and awesome to ask some really good questions. For example, we've already talked about stuff like the nature of the soul, right? What morality means in the face of predeterminism, where gods are manipulating your mind and what you want to do. What does that look like for morality? Defining your identity when you're continuously being stripped away of who you are. But again, there's a few thoughts that I have that really focus on bringing out depth and meaning to the suffering, right, unending war of the realms. The big spoiler here is that, little hint, emotional investment's really important. It's the reason why we have so many people who loved fantasy battles still upset about their world going away. It's because they were emotionally invested in it. The first thing I would point out is that I would love to see more character-focused series. We have a few. We have Gardas is a reoccurring character. Not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily pivot on him. Books don't happen sequentially like that, but he is a reoccurring character enough that we know who he is. We also have the Callison Toll. I believe they're in 2 books now. Black Talon has a book and 2 short stories. I think one's a prequel, one's a sequel to the book itself, and I believe the Korgus Call series, The Red Feast, is the first book in what's supposed to be an ongoing series, and I really hope it is. Sticking with a character or a group of characters, I think, is incredibly important because it lets us understand the world through their eyes, right? We understand the factions that they represent, the world around them, and how they perceive and react to that world. And you think of books like Harry Potter, right? And the reason I bring up Harry Potter is because that was a series where we got to hang out with particularly 3 students, Harry, Ron, Hermione, as they grew and aged and engaged in this whole new world that they are learning about, right? Or specifically Harry's learning about. And the reason I'm not even a huge fan of Harry Potter at all, but the reason I bring that up is because we have this vast, kind of abstract at times, universe that if we just focused on one character, someone relatable, preferably human, and got to know the world through them and their experiences, I think it could do a lot of good. Because right now, we see a lot of books coming out from Black Library, they're like, oh, and this is the camel, and it doesn't really matter, but if you were introduced to this shocking new creature that you never saw before, and we were allowed to understand and learn about things at the same rate as our character, because we've been following them for so long, I think it's just more meaningful, rather than just glazing over surface level what's in the world without giving much description or engagement, being excited and confused by the things that they are interacting with because they're all new would be a big deal. And then letting us stick with that character for a time. Pick a faction, develop a strong character, and then let us see the world through their eyes. And when I say a strong character, I mean complete with flaws as well. Make them a fallible person. How do they think the realms around them are in terms of hostility, or do they feel creeped out by the Sylvaneth? Are they scared of beasts of chaos pouncing on them at any given time? What are the cities like? Day-to-day religious experiences. What do they hate, love, and have to defend? These are all things that go into making up a rich worldview. Right now, Age of Sigmar Black Library books are generally one-offs. They're just kind of cool stories, and there are cool stories, but they don't tie into greater narratives. But taking the time to kind of have the camera sit on the shoulder of one individual within a faction, really experience the mortal realms through their eyes, right? One campaign or enemy at a time would be amazing. And they don't have to develop new characters. They've already written some incredible ones. Right? You have stuff like Corgus Cole, in the current time, not in the Red Feast, or Vandus Hammerhand, Tornus. These are all characters that have incredibly rich character presence whenever they're in the books, but they're always treated very surface level. And then from the Rumgate Wars, we just kind of get shout outs and shade thrown at something like Vandus Hammerhand. But they don't really follow him anymore. We have not seen him in a long time. So, go back to that guy. What's he been doing? How are his visions tormenting him? You know what I mean? Really explore the world. They've made such good characters and then just dropped them. And following Stormcast Eternals as kind of my thought process leads me into what I think the books really, really need when it comes to emotional attachment, and it's trauma. I was hoping for a while that GW would go back to having humans be the main, movers and shakers of the lore, right? From the humans' perspective, what are the realms like? But they seem very dead set on, the Stormcast are the poster boys. That is their plan, and I get that. The problem is I don't relate to a lightning-infused eternal demigod. You might be surprised by that, but I don't. And so there's a few things that make Stormcast Eternals really hard to relate to, and that is the idea of reforging. We have some hints that stuff's not going right, and it's plainly said that there's problems with reforging, but we don't know what that looks like to really dive into their minds and experience those pains with them. Black Talon got close, more of her fear of being something wrong, but it turns out she was perfectly fine, so that's not really the same. To give you an example, the book, you can go watch the review in the playlist down below. Black Talon, First Mark, I believe what the full title is. The ending fell very flat. The book was generally really good, but I thought the ending was the flattest thing ever. To kind of give you a brief synopsis, the one girl was hit head on with a Nurgle, blight spell, and she got mangled real bad. And so it ends with our hero running to get her to help, someone who can help patch her up, purify the chaos strain in her. But in the end of the book, it's just Neve Black Talon, who is a Knight Zephyros, having a conversation with another Stormcast, and the general thought is, I guess she lived, and everyone was kind of fine, and then the book just kind of ends, and that's all there was. And I think they missed the real possibilities there. And I talked about my thoughts for a better ending, but actually, to put it in perspective of what I'm talking about here with trauma, if the human had died after we had spent so much time investing in that relationship, and Neve Black Talon showed pain and anguish that this fight for the realms took something personally from her, and she hated having to live with that, I think that would have made way more of an impact than having she's good to go. If you've ever seen the movie The Iron Giant, right, back when we were all kids, the premise of that movie is really interesting, and actually learning more about the development of it was really fun, because at some point the writer of it pitched the idea as, what if there was a gun that didn't want to hurt people? And that's the actual pitch for the Iron Giant. What if there was a gun that didn't want to hurt people? That is to say, a Stormcast Eternal has been engineered to be one of the deadliest weapons in the realm. It is meant to push back the unfathomable darkness that is the Chaos Gods. But that weapon is a person. It has feelings that can be hurt, and it can suffer trauma emotionally, and it can bear wounds. It'll eventually die and be reforged and get a new body, right? But it can fail. It can bear disappointment, dishonor, and pain. When you start applying, anthropomorphic things like emotions to what is essentially Sigmar made a weapon to fight chaos, all of a sudden that damage that the world does to the emotions matters so much more. Trauma, right? It's just, the word is just trauma. I can't relate to a lightning demigod, but I can relate to losing someone that I care for, as long as the authors take the time to show us that pain. Personally, real world, doing real talk here, I struggle with mental health. There are days where I feel like I am losing myself. Show me a Stormcast who feels like they're losing themselves, and let me relate to that. And it's not all bad. It can be the sense of feeling blessed when everything around me is falling apart. I relate to that as well. To be working really hard at something just to see it fall apart. Like maybe, they've secured an area and something just sweeps in, right? Skaven pour out of the ground and ruin everything. If they want Stormcast Eternals to be the real focus of their narratives, then give us that, right? Give us the things we understand and connect and relate to, and then let us see how it affects them over time in a series, is what I'm saying, right? I want these characters to be relatable, and by following them, make the world more understandable. Now, that's my big one. That's my big thing that I want, that I think would drastically improve Age of Sigmar lore, because they've made Stormcast kind of the center focus. But one thing else I want to tack on here at the end, and I want your opinion on it, is I want Destruction to be a major player. When we are done with the malign sorcery, Necroquake arc, whatever you want to call it, and Nagash is sufficiently smacked down, I think it's really important to have Destruction armies as a whole be in power for a bit. Not just because everyone deserves their time in the spotlight, but because I think they offer something wholly unique. Destruction as kind of a grand alliance, if you will, is such a unique one because they bring an entirely new spin into this kind of war for the realms, right? Because Order wants to build cities to have safe independence and prosperity. Nagash wants absolute authority to rule. It's like Order, but it's his Order. And then Chaos wants to control everything, to own and dominate and subjugate and twist. But all of those ideologies kind of fly in the face of the setting. And by that I mean the realms are, by nature, a very wild, untamable place. They have their own distinct personalities and traits, and they warp you a little bit. If you're in the realm of fire, you get more aggravated and that kind of stuff. And if you're in the realm of light, you become more illuminated and wise and stuff like that. They have their own world views kind of baked into them. And I see Destruction armies as being kind of the great equalizer, right? No, I don't want to be tamed or dominated or controlled or owned. If you want something, you need to earn it. You can't just own it. I want Goradrak to lead a great war that shakes the other factions to their core, where no more structure or safety exists. There's only predator and prey. It's the idea of the realms fighting back, right? Before the gods came in the Age of Myth, the realms were wild and unfettered from all this control and people vying for power. Let's go back to that time, right? Let's buck off all of this control that everyone wants and go back to the time where it's just survival. Right now with Nagash and Order, it's a very ordered, I'll put that, Death and Order are both ordered in their own ways, but I think Destruction armies are the natural counterbalance that I want that pendulum to swing far the other way as well. And I think we could have some incredible story arcs come out of that kind of thing. We have supply lines getting wrecked and cities need to forage for food on their own. Now they're engaging more with the environment, with what's literally near them. Everyone has to fend for themselves. The magic of the realms, now destabilized thanks to the Necroquake, lashes out against its inhabitants. Cities fall into free states and things get fractured really, really quickly. You can have rebellions. The plans of Nagash fall apart, so he couldn't account for the wild nature of the realms kind of uprising against all civilizations everywhere. And Chaos can't get a foothold because the fighting just doesn't stop. Instead of Order versus Chaos or Order versus Death, it becomes everyone versus kind of the realms, the wild spirit that stalks all of them. A big kind of societal collapse that sees Destruction rise and become a major player. That's what I want. That's my dream out there. And if you're somebody who agrees with that, let me know in the comments below. But those are kind of my thoughts regarding how we can make AOS lore better. And to kind of surmise them really, really quickly, because they do kind of tie into one another. Having a series that focuses deeply on characters to help us understand and engage the world around us. Focusing on trauma, especially when it comes to Stormcast Eternals, to make them more characterful, relatable, and kind of go into why their eternal punishment, their eternal life is actually a punishment, I think. It's a hellish existence, and I think that needs to be explored too, not just all shiny, the Stormcasts are here and everybody wins and that kind of stuff. And then lastly, that there is a counterbalance to subjugating the realms, that they want to be wild, that this is still a crazy, awesome, abstract setting, and that pendulum will swing the other way to breaking off any kind of control that all these factions want. I love all that stuff. If you agree, I want to hear your thoughts. If you have something that you think would clean up or improve the quality of writing for Age of Sigmar books, leave in the comments down below. I'd love to talk to you there, and I will see you next time. Happy wargaming.